specificity you probably wanted for the predictions of the future. But then I figure 8 years from now is far enough away that I'm not going to tell you what kind of products they'll be because I have a clue. But what do I think the opportunities are? What kinds of things are the opportunities? The uninteresting opportunities that we're going to get more, better, faster. So we're going to have things everywhere. We're going to have the internet everywhere, where wireless becomes sort of the easy reference to that. But it's just everywhere, all the time, anytime you want it. Let's see. I guess McDonald's has a market goal that it's no more than 4 minutes to the next McDonald's. Okay, well, my guess is it's probably no more than 45 degrees of arc of turning to the next internet access point. Integration. We're starting to get internet in devices that are not inherently internet devices. They're not PCs. And so ViewSonic just announced a display that's actually capable of being another internet display device in your house. I assume they use wireless in the house for that. We're starting, the standard joke is about internet in your refrigerator. Well, that may be a joke, but let me tell you, we had 2 power outages in the last week, and personally I found it kind of irritating to have to keep resetting the clock in all these different devices. Now that may sound like a trivial example, but in fact it was work, and I probably got it wrong, and there is some potential repercussion as we have more and more sophisticated controls in devices. Let's see, I have replay TV rather than direct TV, rather than TiVo, and I can come in over the net and set up for reservations of what's to record, and I can do that from anywhere. So when I'm traveling, if I discover there's a show that's going to play, I can tell my replay to record that. Well, that's a kind of integration, and everywhere. Now, what do I mean by synthesize? Actually, what I mean by synthesize, since integration is up there ahead, I actually don't mean putting things together. Synthesize, what I mean by that is bringing information together and doing interesting things with it. And by collaboration, I mean people being able to get things done in a collaborative way that they couldn't do easily or at all now. And I have some more about that. Now, DMCA is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and it's down here as just a reference to intellectual property and legal issues. What we're seeing is, especially because of September 11, is so much fear that we've got some really bizarre stuff going on. And I'm not trying to slam DMCA as much as point out that it highlights a trend towards information control that is sort of the opposite of what the internet has been about. And that's a tension that I think we're going to see for quite some time. And since I was born just before the McCarthy era in this country and lived in Los Angeles, and actually my parents knew people who I was told I can't say that they've actually been putting on a play in the church, I'm a little concerned about the implications of this kind of control over people's activities. The 6 orders of magnitude is a reference I really like. This actually, we may even be as high as 7 right now. From its start to roughly 5 years ago, the internet went through 6 orders of magnitude of growth, and there's only 2 more before it covers everybody on the planet. And I just think that's kind of an astonishing number. How many systems do you know that could have continuous operation through 6 orders of growth? That's pretty amazing. One of the other lessons is when you have all of these layers, is for interoperability to take place, you have to have interoperability at all of those layers. If you break any one of them, you don't have interoperability. As the internet was getting started, and you still run into this occasionally with things like Microsoft doing proprietary changes, is you get the statement based on open systems. Based on is a code word, which means proprietary. It means we started with open systems and then we made it closed.
We took the open system and made a product out of it.
That's right. And then another one is that there's a social impact of all of this access that is really tough. And that is either you have to get more parental or you have to get better inoculated. By more parental, I mean somebody has to decide what to regulate that you or your children or your neighbor can see or do. Because there's going to be people who will abuse it. And if you're trying to prevent that, They're going to prevent more than just the abusers. They're going to prevent the good people. And so that's a kind of parental process. Personally, I think they're not very effective because I think the downside is so large. None of these controls are really surgical. They sweep too broad. And what that means is, yes, we'll filter your spam, but now you can't do research on sexual diseases if you have one, for example. That's a recent study that just came out. Is all of that good pornography control is in fact preventing people from doing legitimate medical research. All of this good spam control prevents you from getting newsletters you've signed up for because there are no technical differences between those two objects. Neither the message is different, nor the traffic flow is different. So trying to distinguish between spam, the bad stuff, and subscriptions, the good stuff, is tough. The other issue, the other approach is to say we live in a noisy world. And that's a fact we're going to have to deal with. And it means that rather than, I'm going to carry this to a very dangerous extreme, but I'm trying to make the point. Rather than try to prevent children from seeing pornography, is we have to have children no longer care about pornography. Now that's asking a lot, but it turns out that that is something that's possible, and I'm not sure we have a choice. Because they're going to get at it anyhow. That's the downside of the increased access we have. Okay, so what was interesting in the diagram that I put up is, in fact, we don't have major breakthroughs very often. And I'm saying 20 years because it looks like that's a reasonable guess. We had the original work in the 70s, and then we had a whole lot of work after that, making it more, better, faster, but not different. Notice that we had a whole bunch of applications in the 1970 time frame, and we did not have any interesting new applications until 1990. The only exceptions were DNS and email, and I'm sorry, email was just more, better, faster, and DNS was just more, better, faster. 1990, we started getting some information services, a whole bunch of effort on that. And so my guess is somewhere around 2010, we're going to be ready again. And then until then, we're doing more, better, faster, and maybe we can try to, have little pockets of innovation. But I'm not too hopeful. So we need all of that speed, improved reliability, improved scaling. But it's not the paradigm breakthrough. It's just more, better, faster. I've already said about how long it takes to change the infrastructure. As wonderful as the web is, it's really quite horrible. The web is a central service. You don't use, your PC is an access device. It's not a computer anymore. And you can say, well, we download Java and this and that and the other. But fundamentally, it's a server farm somewhere. It's a central computing facility, and you're the client. And so the web has turned the world into a collection of server farms, which is central computing. And the web, by the way, isn't very useful if you're not attached to the net. Now, that might sound like a really silly thing to say, because the net isn't useful if you're not attached to it. But I will point out to you that email is extremely useful when you're attached only part-time. The web is not useful when you're attached part-time. And you might say, well, what about all those offline files and cache? And the answer is, yeah, a little bit. But that doesn't work all that well. It turns out that moving to real distributed computing, and peer-to-peer is intended to be that, whether it really achieves it is not clear, but real distributed computing is vastly harder to do interesting things with than client-server or centralized computing. And to hit a social point is, one of the downsides of all this stuff on the net being available is all this stuff on the net is in front of my face. You have to know how to configure your computers, you have to know how to know what passwords to remember everywhere, you have to know the idiosyncrasies of using the reservation system with United Airlines, which is different from American Airlines, which is different from Orbitz. There's just an incredible amount of detail that we're now overwhelmed with. So in fact, all of this wonderful stuff is becoming a problem because there's all of this wonderful stuff.
Could be, right?
Well, he might fall. We might not be able to put them back together. Okay, 7-layer model. I assume most people have seen this. This is the core of the technical work. It came out in 1976 from the ISO world. And it was very interesting. Prior to the 7-layer model coming out, conversations around the ARPANET were quite predictable when we were talking about networking. You'd spend the first half of your conversation getting a common sense of terminology, and the second half using it to talk about whatever you were interested in. After the 7-layer model came out, you'd spend the first half of your conversation complaining about the 7-layer model, and the second half using it. Well, it's become common these days to talk about 2 additional layers. This as the net became large and commercial. And in fact, there's a T-shirt that's been distributed which has these and says, "You're here," pointing to political. When the political wars that surrounded the activity that became ICANN, so the domain name politics, which went all the way up to the White House and the European Union and so on, when they hit and I started watching the way people were behaving, I decided that, in fact, this went beyond politics, that we were entering another realm of pure emotion and rigidity. And this is worth thinking about because I think as the internet becomes more regular in our daily lives, the issues are in these upper layers, not really the interesting issues at the lower layers. So I told you about the data, info, knowledge, wisdom, and that explains why in the 2010 I put wisdom under it. I sort of skipped over info. What we do see with a scaling effect, whether it's faster or more or better, is some differences in degree do in fact have the effect of being a difference in kind. The email world